What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to episode 110 of the Lombard Trucking Show. Thank you all for joining me. Appreciate all the feedback I've gotten from last episode talking with Repower, an amazing group, and did a little bit of manifesting on there. The gentleman from Repower just recently linking up with friend of the show, Evan Shelley, and Truck Parking Club, two companies, both in different kind of silos of the industry. One with both actually using similar thing, underutilized assets, turning them around, making solutions instead of causing more problems. You love to see those stories of, especially with what Truck Parking Club's doing with people who just out there, because obviously when we had Evan on the show, we talked about how zoning is a big roadblock for truck parking. That's what's that's where a lot of the issues where truck parking comes from. There's all this, everybody knows it's an issue, but yet nobody wants the trucks in their backyard. So truck parking clubs essentially circumventing that, solving problems with underutilized assets. Repower doing the same thing. You have a lot of large carriers who have trailers not being used. You have a lot of small businesses who don't own or don't necessarily see the value of owning a trailer, and you make that collaboration and there's problems being solved, which leads us right to today's episode, one that I've been really looking forward to. Been talking about it since we met back at F3 in November. Just an all-around amazing human being, Kary Jablonski. When we met, number one, I wouldn't have known and I don't mean this as a slight. I didn't know she was the CEO of a company when I met her because she's a little bit younger and she was willing to hang out with the guys wearing the Please Advise hats and wanted to talk with us and get those conversations. Then I see the name tag and I see CEO, and I was like, oh my God, I've been talking to you like you're one of the boys, as opposed to the CEO of a really great, freight tech company, a load board. And, just the way her personality, the way she is, how she wants to talk, just an electric human being, and bringing her on the show to tell her story, how she rose to this position, entered the industry, is definitely one that just needs to be talked about a little bit more. We're all about highlighting those stories. But so without any further delay, let's bring her on the show, Miss Kary Jablonski herself. How you doing?
I am blushing. That was far too kind of an introduction. And I like to think of myself as, just one of the dudes. I can hang with anyone.
No, you absolutely can. You were out there at the TI concert, just hanging out with everybody.
Oh yeah.
And just your omnipresence at F3 of like walking around, wanting to talk with people, just like you're an inside or outside salesperson, just, out there, pimping the brand and just being who you are, I think was pretty electric.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah. I really believe, and my team knows this, that the CEOs I respect most are the ones who can kind of be dangerous in any position and can walk the walk of things they're asking their own team to do. So it's really important to me that I'm out there and, selling, talking to customers, getting all the feedback. So I appreciate that.
Especially in a world like the media in this world, there's always a lot of headlines, buzz headlines that kind of, whenever you hear the term CEO now, there's these, negative connotations with it, because you always see these big articles from certain media brands about CEOs and how their pay is rising, but the workers' pay stays the same. So whenever we hear the term CEO, there's almost a negative connotation about it. And you're the opposite. Like the way kind of that my first impression of you was that you were the founder. You were the founder of almost your own startup, like how you're kind of you're treating TruckerTools as your own, and like how you're like basically not you're more humbled is like the best way to put it out there, and you're willing to get right down onto that kind of assembly line level with your employees, which I think is different. So definitely a good brand. You're a good CEO.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
But let's dive right into it. You're in the number one. Love that you're in the capital of the Midwest there, Chicago. Big. This podcast, big Midwest respecter account, big Chicago respecter account, and all aspects of everything. We're very bullish on the Midwest here on this show, so I'm glad to have you joining us from there. But let's get right into your.
What's funny about your Chicago, bullishness is that we actually, I don't know if everyone knows this, but you and I are both native New Englanders who are very bullish on the Midwest, which I think is a very uncommon. That Venn diagram is not very large, so I'm proud to be representing on here.
Yeah, we're right in that very small crosshairs that interject, which I'm all about. But we're going to grow it bigger. But let's get right into it. So let's tell us your story. You said you're a native New Englander. So where are you from, and kind of walk us up to today?
Yeah, so I am from the Boston area. Technically, actually, a lot of people don't know this either. I was born in New Jersey, but my family moved to Boston when I was about 6. So grew up in the Boston area. My mom's from there originally, and spent, my childhood in New England. Went to college. I knew I wanted to get out of Massachusetts, had been there quite some time, and just wanted to see the rest of the country. So I went further down to kind of the more north meets south to Washington, D.C., went to school at Georgetown. And that's where I was really introduced to small business. I worked for a student-run company all the way through college. We ran grocery stores. I was really involved in a leader in the catering company. And that just introduced me to, small business being the engine of the country and something I was really passionate about. I wanted to be someone who, had, like we were just talking, always kind of in the weeds of the business and really close to it. So spent a lot of time in college doing that. Knew business was the way for me to go. I graduated and, briefly my first job was in consulting for businesses and for the government. I just, wanted to kind of get acclimated to the working world. And I knew really quickly I wanted to move to something a lot scrappier and more entrepreneurial. So I was by no stretch of the imagination an early employee at Uber, but I did join Uber back in 2016, not on the freight side, but actually on the ride sharing and Uber Eats side, and spent 3 years originally in the Washington, D.C. office. And then I spent time in Indonesia and Mexico City working on emerging markets. Had an awesome experience just learning, how to grow a business really fast, how to scale. And that experience solidified for me that transportation logistics was something I was really psyched about. And I saw how technology could be such a game changer in impacting the lives of the folks who are actually moving the goods. So from there is how I came into the industry. I was looking for my next gig after Uber and was really interested in freight tech. And I had met the folks who had actually just bought TruckerTools. So our founders, Prasad and Murali, who I can talk more about in the history of the business, sold TruckerTools in 2021. So the new owners were really, really bullish on the business and wanted to find an operator to come in and steer us into our next phase of evolution. So that's when I stepped in. It was a great fit. I worked really closely with Prasad and Murali for 2.5 years through the transition, and have been here ever since.
And so and how old are you at this point?
How old am I?
No, well, how old were you when they brought you in as CEO?
Yeah, so I technically I was the COO for the first several months, for 6 months, but yeah, I did become the CEO at age 29.
Yeah, see, that's the powerful story right there, is showing how you bet on yourself. You stuck with something opened you up, and people notice that. And that's what I think, that's the most fascinating part about your story is and I said it at the top of the show, like when, that's another thing with CEOs. When you think CEO, you automatically assume age, and you're thinking anywhere possibly 40s to 60s, like for CEO. And here you are on the kind of the opposite end of that bell curve, of that kind of story, especially with something like, even in the freight industry, like a lot of people before you see this with their senior leadership, with talking with Gnosis Freight, with talking with the guys at Repower, it's on the younger level when it comes to the freight tech side of the CEOs. And that's something I think a lot of people don't see or notice. And I think that's a great thing out there for young people to see, is just how open this industry is to problem solvers.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. I definitely had to overcome some of my own personal imposter syndrome when I moved into that role and got, had that title. And it's something I think about. I think especially also being a female CEO, there's not a ton of us in the freight world. So just, leaning into being really proud of that and owning it, and realizing that, I can hang with the best of them. So yeah, I appreciate that. I think freight tech is particularly cool because there are so many young CEOs who, we've got this community of folks, and, I've spent a lot of time on Twitter over the last several months, and just being on LinkedIn. It's been awesome to see the energy that's coming up in kind of this generation of freight leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. So let's dive right into TruckerTools, because that's kind of that is kind of a big jump, going from obviously technology is technology is not always specific to one industry, because in the freight tech world, the technology being utilized is also being utilized can be utilized in other industries, especially when it comes to, like, even when I talk to other people, especially now in the fitness industry with their operating systems, I compare them to a TMS in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and how it works. So the tech is very interchangeable. But when it comes, let's dive right into TruckerTools. Like, essentially, what's the background of TruckerTools? What's a little bit of the history, like your kind of overview with it, and what's the overall, like, overarching vision, over there at TruckerTools?
As a side note, I'd love to do some kind of fitness specific deep dives with you, because I'd love to learn more from you about your career in fitness. It's something I'm very passionate about, but that's total side note from TruckerTools. Yeah, so the TruckerTools story is really cool. So our founder, Prasad Galopoli, and his co-founding CTO, Murali Yellapetty, started the business back in 2009 as the first mobile app for owner operators, which, just to walk you back to 2009, I don't even think I had a BlackBerry. I think I had a mobile phone, a flip phone. And then I got a BlackBerry in 2010. And these guys were so visionary that they were creating an iPhone and Android mobile app back then, when I don't even know what minuscule percent of the country actually had a smartphone. So they were they were visionary in seeing that there was this real need. Prasad's background was he was a very key employee at Get Loaded, which was a load board that eventually sold to DAT back in the 2000s. So he really understood what it was like to be out there as an independent owner operator trucker on the road, and how challenging it is just to kind of figure out, I got to find a new job for tomorrow. As a carrier, often just, finding a new job several times a week, and how stressful that can be, how there's lack of predictability, how there's just all this constant decision-making and calculus you need to have. So they created a free app for carriers in the spirit of solving a lot of those problems, and eventually connecting them with places to find those jobs, brokerages. So business started back in 2009, and really the first 5 years of TruckerTools was all about really, growing that carrier community. So we were big at truck stops. We were all over the carrier world, and just growing that network. And that is something, those who are in the freight world, especially on the brokerage side, understand how hard it is to, brokerages to spend years and years and years trying to build up their carrier network, and the speed with which TruckerTools did that, because of the valuable app they provided for these guys who are out there, just grinding on the roads, is pretty remarkable. So that's always been the underlying spirit of our app, is we are the app for small fleets, owner operators, to help you live your life on the road, and specifically, provide visibility in the easiest, most data secure way possible, and also be able to find work. So in 2014 or 15, entered the brokerage world for the first time, and we had all these carriers. I can imagine, how you felt about check calls, but they absolutely suck. No one wants to get hit up every day, every hour by someone. Pick up the phone. You see all the memes about that. So the insight that TruckerTools had was that we could get into the visibility game, and just, with this app that people really, really trust and understand what they're doing, on it, and feel really comfortable with, could provide visibility to brokerages to make it a lot easier. Again, the goal has always been make it easier for carriers that are out on the road to do their work. So we got into the visibility game in 2014, 2015. And then a couple of years after that, say late 2010s, we got into the capacity world. Again, the insight there is looking for work as an owner operator is a full-time job in itself. We've got dispatchers, the whole shebang. So we introduced a load marketplace called Smart Capacity. So that is completely free for carriers via mobile app and through our website, bookaload.truckertools.com. And able to go on there and interact with, we've now got 550 brokers in our network. So a great place to get access to really, really valuable freight to move. On the broker side, we have a ton of tools to help them automate their business. The visibility tool has been, really the biggest one, and is something we're really proud of. We've always worked for brokers, with brokers, built by brokers, and we're now providing visibility to tons and tons of brokerages, and allowing carriers to do that either through our mobile app or through our ELDs. That's a whole separate topic we can probably dive into, but what the ELD mandate has done to visibility, and kind of what that actually means for the carrier experience. the kind of current chapter that we're in is in early 2021. Prasad and Murali decided to bring in new ownership called Alpine Software Group. They buy vertical SaaS businesses. So they loved Freight. They loved what we were doing. Got really excited about it. Got really excited about what TruckerTools was doing. Bought the business. It was a great outcome for Prasad and Murali, who stayed very, very involved through the whole transition, which is when I came in. And my focus ever since I've been a part of TruckerTools has been one, reorienting us on the carrier experience. So that, is coming through several ways. We've got a brand new refreshed mobile app launching later this year. So really excited to share that with the carrier community when it's ready to go. And then two, just doubling down our focus on brokerage visibility. There's a ton I can talk about there, but I think, as you think about the economy and the world over the last several years, and they've been hard times. And I think something that we've done really well to get through this challenging period in freight is focus on few things, really, really knocking those out of the park. And I'm happy to talk more about that. So the business is thriving. I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of how we're solving customer problems and how we're continuing to grow that carrier network.
Yeah, I love that origin story, especially going back to 2009. I had the G1, which was a smartphone, and it was a Google phone, and it was running off Android in 2000. I believe I got that in 2009. And
Wow.
Just to really put ourselves into 2009, that's essentially like when MySpace died.
Yes.
Is a great frame of reference for anybody out there listening.
RIP.
RIP. But I definitely put TruckerTools in my top 8 just off that origin story alone when it comes to MySpace. But I love what you just said there at the end, especially about your vision and taking care of those very few big things, because I think that is where, because we've seen some attrition throughout the industry. I mean, and I'm included with having come off the road, but mainly in the forms of freight tech and carriers. There's I guess in freight tech specifically, a lot of their attrition or exit from the market is because maybe they were doing too much.
Yep.
They wanted to be involved in like almost every little facade they can get into. Where when you just really need to focus on like 1 to 2 things and go really deep into that and drive those things home. And right there, you just said in your vision, doubling down on what you're already doing and what you started on. And focus and then really focusing on carriers. And I think that that's what's making you kind of skyrocket as opposed to some of the other attrition we've seen.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think another thing that we've actually done really well is I obsess over the business's numbers. Like my team will tell you, I am in the spreadsheets, I am in the models, I am, on calls, I am in it with them. And what that means is we really understand kind of the engine of what's powering our business, what's happening, and to take it to the carrier experience. I think that's something that carriers who have been able to kind of weather the storm and stayed out there on the road on their own, understand their business so well. They can tell you exactly what their operating profit was last month and knowing what the inputs to that were. So that's something I think about a lot, is like how can we empower owner operators to better understand what's actually happening in their business, is something that personally interests me, and is something I just think is interesting to think about. What solutions are out there, because that just understanding exactly what your business is, where your strengths lie, and how to measure those, I think helps weather these difficult periods.
Oh, and I'm really glad you said that, because you couldn't be more right on how a lot of these are. Like I knew just after like maybe 6 months, I kind of knew every aspect and bullet point of like my cost per mile and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And where I'm still learning and still like keeping myself like a sponge. If you go on and you said that you've been on Twitter these last few months, you hop into any one of these Twitter spaces or you get engaged with some of our friends on, I'd like to give a shout out to TJ, who's, he's a former Marine and a fleet owner himself. And you get into these Twitter spaces with a lot of these carriers. And that's why we're going on LinkedIn and telling like, hey, if you're in this industry, you need to be on Twitter, because you see some of these guys and they're very, and some of our friends in these spaces, very against the grain, very, very much a trucker by nature. And you what you see is what you get. But these, all of these carriers and all the people we do talk to and we've been socializing with on this network, you talk to them about the business aspect of it. They know, they're just like you, how you're in the spreadsheets. They're the same way. They're almost just very like right into their numbers, knowing what they need. And a lot of it's based off of sheer experience. The more and more people who can get in on that and get that, that's part of the reason why I've been doing the show and doing the show live on LinkedIn, to get that word out there. And now people are hearing it from you, the CEO of a load board company, like, hey, getting to know these numbers is going to help people out there doing the job who you want to use your service.
Exactly. Yeah. And it is funny. I feel like it always sounds trite when people say, like, I'm really passionate about business, or kind of cliche, but it is true. I think about it. I think I have a very healthy work-life balance and all of that, but I think about kind of the underlying levers and drivers of business and kind of what's driving us forward constantly. And I think that obsession in some ways is hopefully contributing to some of our success.
Yeah, I'm on the kind of the board of, like, I really like when it comes to work-life balance, and I believe I've said this before. And I think when you gun for, and this is what you're probably doing, but when people gun for work-life balance, you're always going to end up disappointed. Where you're successful, and what the key is not having a work-life balance. It's whatever you're doing, be present in it. Like if you're at work, be there. If you are with your family, be there. If you're like, and that's where you're going to find the good mesh, and it ends up figuring itself out. And that's kind of what you're doing. You've now kind of moving ahead. You answered some of my questions, because you mentioned that, you already answered them in what you're describing, because I definitely want to go in, how it's been working maybe with some partnerships and collaborations, but clearly the original founder, they worked into selling off. They've collaborated with, a software company that's obviously looking to take TruckerTools to new heights. But then let's get right into kind of, because you mentioned two things that I want to bring up. So when it comes to, you are a freight tech company, it's all about that vertical SaaS stuff. When it comes to technological innovation, essentially, you guys were an innovator. TruckerTools was an innovator in 2009, but what are the key technological innovations that you're kind of planning to introduce or going to do? I know you said a new app's coming later this year, and how are you kind of ensuring that, your technology is going to keep you ahead of the curve of everybody else out there?
Yeah, great question. So first, I'll speak again to the refreshed app. It's something I'm really excited about. It's going to make it much easier for carriers to come on and understand, how can I be using the resources on here? I think the refresh design is something we put a ton of work into, and it's going to make it even clearer where carriers can be, connecting with brokers who are a good fit for them. So that's really something I'm excited about. This next major, technological initiative that I want to call out here is the way we're revamping the way we get in touch with carriers, which is largely through email. Carriers live and die, kind of refreshing emails, checking out load boards, all of that. So we know there's a ton to sort through. So what we're able to do, because we have worked with carriers for so long and, understand their preferences and where they like to be and what sort of freight they like to run, we have an email algorithm that powers out recommended loads for carriers to engage with, to book with, depending on, if they're in network with the brokerage or not. And that's something we're revamping right now too, so that we can help carriers, again, spend more time doing their job as opposed to finding their next one by sending them the best recommendations possible via email. So stay on the lookout for some updates there if you're a carrier who's getting our emails. And then on the third thing I want to call out is we are known as, the leading tracking platform in freight for brokerage, which is something I'm really proud of. Right now, there's several ways that you can, visibility is something that every carrier has to provide. The market sucks right now, so it's even more important, because ultimately that all rolls up to the shipper. Shippers can demand the highest service levels possible when the market is really down. So that's flowing through to the brokers and ultimately to the carriers to provide visibility. So our new app, our refreshed app, is going to be something that's going to even drive even more connectivity for carriers if that's how they prefer to track, via the mobile app. And then secondly, the ELDs. So I know this is obviously a hot topic, especially in the sort of carrier community that we work most in, which is with small fleets and owner operators primarily. We've seen, and I'm really, really curious for your take, Lombard, we've seen a lot of cultural, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of hesitation about these ELDs and what are they doing with my data, and this sucks. We've actually seen a lot of openness over the last year for carriers to integrate their ELDs into our network, because it actually, we've been really deliberate about what we're doing with data, which is exactly what we say we're doing, is just taking it, passing it on to the brokerage so they can pass it on to the shipper. So we're all good. Visibility compliance is there, and that's it. And it's a lot, frankly, easier. It's a kind of a set it and forget it thing for tracking, as opposed to tracking via mobile app, which requires you to have your phone charged. You can go through a dead zone. You could accidentally turn things off. Things happen there. But with the ELD, because it is built in, it's going to automatically start when a load's picking up. It's going to automatically end when a load's dropped off. So it's just a one-time setup. And we've seen an explosive growth, especially, again, in our small fleet and owner-operator community. We're adding thousands and thousands of carriers into our ELD network month over month. So we're spending a lot of time investing in that technology to make it as reliable and secure as possible. And I'm excited about that, because I think, again, it is ultimately allowing folks to spend more time focused on the road, which is really what they should be doing. What have you, from your vantage point, what have you seen in the way of kind of relationships to the ELDs at this point?
Well, what's crazy is you've actually listed one of the something I've heard from other drivers and owner operators on how that they've enjoyed or that they still don't love the ELD.
Of course.
But here's where the separation herein lies, because the ELD itself, what you just described, is a phenomenal benefit for everybody, for the carrier, the shipper, the receiver, you at TruckerTools, and the broker. What you just described is a benefit and a solution, and it streamlines data. Where the split comes on the ELD, and I reference, good friend, and you met him at F3, Chris, Indie Trucker, Chris from Kentucky. He has a vehicle, his truck itself. He doesn't need to run an ELD, but he does. For efficiency. And he drove in an era where he ran paper and everything like that, but he does admit where he did and where he didn't mind, where he liked and enjoyed a little bit more of the laissez-faire enforcement on the hours of service, where that was enjoyment, because that's how that's how money was made. That's how small carriers and fleets made money. He's kind of seen that opposite side of essentially what it's been doing on his end when it comes to, storing data and keeping track of those hours. And from that end, that's where the split lies, is because there's not one, I don't think that there's one probably trucker or owner operator or even company driver that would necessarily care about the ELD. Where the split came has to do with the enforcement of the hours of service, because the hours of service always existed like that. Like, everybody's known that. It's always been, you could drive 11 hours in a 14-hour work window. You have a 70-hour clock. They've always existed, but there was, it was a little bit more laissez-faire. It was a little bit more gray area. And it's also how, drivers were able to make a little bit better money, especially small owner operators. And that's where the split lies, that the enforcement is what's impacted drivers more, because now, for even the littlest thing, because in reality, and I channel some energy from friends of the show, Lee and Lisa Schmidt, like, they're not going to be driving 20 hours a day and doing that. Like, no real business owner is going to do that because it's unsafe. Where it becomes a problem for the carrier is when they're at a facility for a long period of time and it chews into that clock, finding parking, and just going a little bit over becomes an issue. But on the other side, what you just described with that data, for that transparency and for that visibility with everybody and with tracking, that's a good thing. And I think if you had that conversation with carriers about that, they're going to tell you, oh my God, this would make a lot of stuff easier. This would be really beneficial. And that would be the use of the technology of the ELD benefiting a small business, benefiting a carrier. But where it doesn't benefit, and that's the thing, it's that there's these scales, like the scales of justice, where it's just like, what is, where I think a lot of owner operators would be torn, because what you just described is really awesome. That's a big innovation that I think keeps TruckerTools ahead of the curve. But is it more valuable? Is it more valuable than maybe the time that they might not see the value of it being able to focus more on the road, because they're still under this eye of Sauron that has that's monitoring, their hours, and essentially they have to, try to skate under the radar for 8 days if they have a violation or if they get audited. That's the thing. It's the micromanagement where even if you get audited and your logs are audited, that dings your MC, it dings your CDL, it dings so much where does what the benefit of what you just described outweigh the cost of kind of what the that eye of Sauron is over them? That's probably the biggest. That's my insight on it.
I think that's phenomenal. And that is exactly why we're always going to have a mobile option for tracking. It's, again, how we started as a business, and maybe apps are going somewhere at some point, but for now, I think they're pretty much here. Something that we are also proud of is that, at least like on LinkedIn, everyone talks about app fatigue. I hear about app fatigue all the time, as everyone tried to build apps over the last 4, 5, 6 years. And since we were so early to the market, again, thanks to our founders, we've been able to avoid the plight of that and just be kind of that evergreen install on a driver's smartphone. It's just something that always sits there because they know it's going to come in handy, and it's going to be something you're going to use time and time again.
Yeah, it's been on people's smartphones since the messages, since your email. It's it almost has the same lifeline. The iPhone came out in 2007, TruckerTools 2009. So essentially, for the email application is only just 2 years older than the TruckerTools icon. So that's definitely something good to fall back on. Now,
sure.
Now with that, I kind of want to go into only because you mentioned the down market,
Yeah.
but you have technological innovations that are hoping to keep you ahead of the curve. Kind of what do you have going into? Does TruckerTools have, even, because I know it's down, and there's this kind of theory in any business of, in a down market, it's a good time, depending on where you're at, to sort of double down. Does TruckerTools, do you have any strategies to possibly scale and grow, possibly enter are there any new markets you're going into? Or are you just looking to kind of maintain? I didn't know if there's any scaling or growth strategies that you specifically are working on, or.
Yeah. Great question. So I attended Ben Gordon's leadership conference in Florida last week, and Renee Krug, who's the CEO of TransFlow, gave a phenomenal analogy about how Southwest Airlines, when they had a meltdown 2 years ago at Christmas, I think it was December of 22, it was a technology failure on their end, because basically their flight attendants, when they got stranded from a storm, couldn't call in, and they had to manually call in and report where they were, and the system couldn't take it. There was no digital way to do it. And I think the really compelling point that Renee made to the freight community is that, had they invested, 2022 was a phenomenal year for what Southwest is doing for airlines. Travel is back post-COVID. Had they invested in upping their tech during a down market, could that have all been avoided? And could they have avoided a several $100 million fine from the government, all the lost, revenue, of course, the cost to take care of customers who did get stranded? And I think I love that analogy to what's happening in freight right now. Like, things are going to turn at some point. Are we going to be back to COVID levels? No. COVID was I don't think it's a black swan event by the technical definition of a black swan.
An anomaly.
Event. Yeah. It was just a weird anomaly. But, things are going to tighten somewhat. The economics of supply and demand and freight brokerage and in trucking, which I think are fascinating, are going to, we're going to move a little bit up. From a rate perspective, or, gas is going to get cheaper. Who knows what's going to happen? But I thought Renee's analogy to Southwest is really compelling about what folks in freight can be doing right now to prepare themselves, so they're ready to take advantage and have a really clear understanding of what it is, like you were talking about, Lombard, where they can win, where they're uniquely positioned to win in a certain segment, in a certain geography, using certain technology. So I think about investing in down markets all the time, and I think our customers do too. So we actually weren't down last year. We were actually up by quite a bit, because we are very much in the growing and scaling phase of this business. We're adding, on the brokerage side, hundreds of customers every year. On the carrier side, we're adding tens of thousands of users every month. So we are growing and scaling. So we've got a phenomenal sales team, a phenomenal marketing team who are leading those efforts in going to market. I spend a ton of my time out in the market. I'm going to be at Manifest next week. I was in 4 freight brokerage offices here in Chicago this week. So it's something I spend a lot of time doing. So a lot of our go-to-market right now is just continuing to scale up what we're doing. And help brokerages really modernize their visibility stack, help them have access to the phenomenal long tail of carriers that we have via TruckerTools. And on the carrier side, it's just continuing to drive app adoption and ELD adoption. So we're definitely in the thick of it. As far as, other verticals we're getting in, what that looks like. So we're releasing a new brokerage product over the next couple of months in the carrier sourcing field, which I'm really excited about. Can't share more details quite yet, but it's something to be on the lookout for over the next couple of months as we head into the spring. And I'm always thinking about what can we be doing. I think, I know obviously probably a lot of carriers listening here. I always want to hear what carrier problems there are to be solved right now, especially with technology, because that's something I'm thinking about all the time. So feel free to hit me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, send me an email, kjablonski@truckertools.com. I really want to hear from the carrier population, what's keeping them up at night right now.
Yeah, I'm going to spread that word too, that there's somebody out there who really at the top of the chain wants to listen. I've had Daniel, Cow, the founder of Truck Smarter, on my show. He keeps himself just as open.
Yeah,
that he wants, he like, and I think that's the only way you can win is by feedback. I'm doing that here in my new role. Like I just, as head coach at fitness facilities, like I want people to tell me what they need. Like I'm hunting down, now I'm looking to solve their problems immediately, as opposed to them going to somebody. Like I want them to come to me directly, not just go to either the studio manager or one of the other coaches. Like I want everybody to come straight to me. And I think you have to do that if you want to succeed. No, that's awesome. I'll tell you what, that Southwest comparison, if there is a way to monetize, I know that people can monetize their ideas, but that comparison right there is $1 million. That smashes the nail on the head of like really like solidifying a really good narrative. And what is sad about Southwest is the reason why they didn't, because in a real world, if Southwest was TruckerTools, or if Southwest was maybe, the guys like Repower and Gnosis, where they had a little bit less hubris going on. Southwest is a company that, they were given a lot of free taxpayer dollars, and they could have used it a lot of different ways, and doubling down on their tech and realizing, okay, hey, nobody's flying now because of, COVID, realizing it's going to turn around and being like, what can we fix? We've done it but here we are. And so, like, why isn't Southwest and these big companies? They should be looking inward. Like, they should be looking at TruckerTools. They should be looking, wow, in this down market, historic freight recession not seen since 2009. Wow, they're in the scaling and growth mode. What did we do wrong? That's just absolutely amazing. I'm going to be using that a lot, and I feel bad because I'm now stealing it and dishing it back out as if it's my own, as if I'm the smart guy. But
well, it wasn't me. It was Renee from Transflow. Give her a shout out. She's the CEO of Transflow, another obviously big player in the carrier and brokerage space. So I think she really, former CEO of Global Trans, she prides herself on being really close to the customer too.
I'll have to reach out with her. I did use Transflow quite often since day one buying a truck. I used Transflow, and I think it's a phenomenal product. But let's kind of move right in. I got a few collab ideas with you. I want to mention towards the end of the show, but you talked about visibility, transparency. Those words have come up, kind of foreshadows. It's a hot topic. We've talked about it F3 a lot. I've been involved with it. I've been involved with fraudsters myself on TikTok. Kind of what it's definitely, there's a lot of good going on at TruckerTools, but there is that that dark shadow of what's been going on with freight fraud, double brokering, cargo theft, the Chicago-based carriers. Sorry, no offense to Chicago. The Chicago-based carriers.
I'm in Chicago proper.
Yeah. the Eastern European crime syndicates. It's an issue. Kind of how have you been dealing with it, and kind of what are your thoughts on it, and what do you kind of do to alleviate any of those problems?
Yeah, has been a huge focus of ours over the last year or two as fraud has really become all the industry talks about fairly enough. So a couple of things on the carrier side, mobile app side, we introduced kind of Auth0 secure app authentication back in the fall to secure us up there. We're also releasing a carrier validation feature this year that is going to basically be like when you log on to Southwest Airlines or United Airlines, you type in your password. It says, hey, we just want to make sure you are who you are from this device, what's your mother's maiden name. We're launching something similar to that, so carriers can really double down on, yep, I am who I say I am. So we're excited about that feature. On the visibility front, we see tracking as the best way to provide visibility, to provide security either as a carrier or as a broker, which either side of the equation you're on. If a carrier isn't willing to track, or if a broker can't receive visibility from a carrier in a market like this, that should send some red flags up, because tracking's been around for a long time now. Visibility is, again, like we talked about, become a table stake. So it needs to be something that is kind of a non-negotiable. So I think just a good tip for everyone out there, especially on the brokerage side, use tracking. It's kind of what you have to do to get through in this market. So those are some of the things we're excited about on the load board front. So our marketplace is actually a little bit different in that we're fully integrated with brokerages' TMSs. So we're just pulling loads directly from their internal systems. When they're actually not available, they've been covered, they're automatically removed. They're kind of real time on there. There's no concept of posting like there is on load boards. So what that means is that all the freight on our board is really trustworthy and it's legit, because it's all pulled from internal systems and deep integrations that we've built with these customers of ours. So that also, I think, is worth noting in this market for carriers, that being thoughtful about where it is exactly you're going to get your freight is something that needs to be top of mind.
Yeah, with TruckerTools, that's something that I actually explicitly remember is a lot of times, and I used it, and we talked before because I had hauled a load for Chop Tank, and what was great about that load too is I picked it up in Maryland, and it was going, I believe, to a Costco DC outside of Houston, or maybe it was in Houston, but it was in that area. And when I picked up the load, I got like a huge box of canned tuna. And because it fell off of a pallet, and he's just like, "Do you want this?" So it was one of my favorite. They let me sleep overnight there on site. So it's like, loved doing that. I got a load from TruckerTools, so a little shameless plug there. But when I've used TruckerTools in the past, is there's contact info. There's a name of who you're calling a lot of times.
Yes.
Like you're not, as opposed to when I would use other load boards, I would just be calling a number and anyone picked up, but there was like contact information. And that's something I specifically remember about using TruckerTools, is that there was contact info of who I was calling, where they're out of. And I think that there's a ranking on there of who you're calling to. I think there's a star ranking feature.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, again, something we really pride ourselves on, the transparency there. We have, again, these loads are coming directly from brokerages' TMSs. So there's nothing to hide. There's nothing for us to alter. So we just want to make it as simple as possible for you guys to get in touch with each other when things, you found some tuna. There's an extra pallet of tuna, and you're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah, what do I do? Yeah, no, the guy at the warehouse manager, he's like, yeah, man, here, take this tuna. I don't need it. I was like, yeah, I
hate to say, I do not like canned tuna. I think I would have passed on that. When I see tweets and stuff, it's like, there's 5,000 Kit Kats now. What do I do with them? I'm like, take them and eat them all. But tuna, I think I'd pass on.
I'm never going to turn down free protein, though.
That's fair. Shame on me.
Yeah. But so going into collaboration, I guess, a little bit more. And this is just us. This is just me free balling, spitting out loud. I mean, you talked about doubling down on your tech. You're big on building relationships. And I mean, it comes to mind, and I'd be remiss to not mention him because you've met him before. And he's one of my biggest cheerleaders. He helps me out. And maybe this is putting you on the spot, but this is it's something I do on the show. That's why some people tune in, because of how, what I can do. I say certain things a certain way, but have you thought about acquiring lost freight?
Oof, I think their valuation is far, far beyond what we could reasonably do right now to make Reed happy. But I'm always willing to talk. I'm always willing to talk. I think there are a lot of synergies between what we're doing, and I just absolutely admire the way that Reed has. He is really, to be fair, I'm relatively new in the brokerage and freight community 3 or so years ago, but the way I've seen him build a community is pretty remarkable. And I won't lie. A lot of what I'm doing and leaning into the community is based on kind of what I've seen and learned from him and how he's modeling success there. So I think there's certainly Reed and I need to talk. So ping me if you're watching this.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure he pings you, only because I look at what he's doing there with trying to connect, because you mentioned it earlier, like I wanted to bring it up, when it comes to fraud, and it's really, this is the truth, where yes, fraud's an issue, yes, it's a problem, like especially because clearly we have agents in foreign countries who are involved in it, and it's very hard, and it's hard to get the FMCSA ahead of it. But all in all, and I know this is it's a libertarian way of describing it, but what solves the quote unquote free market can solve the problem by businesses building having relationships. Yes. That's what does it. The market can fix this in itself if they do what they're supposed to, is make a market correction by actually doing work with carrier does work with so and so, and then they continue, and then you work with the same person, as opposed to constantly working with new customers. Because even in, like, if you own a retail store and you have 1 out of every 10 customers who comes in steals something, you can stop that by your marketing. You can fix it. There's ways to eliminate that kind of theft from your store, and you can do that by dealing with different people. Or actually, I use a bad analogy. If I own a retail store, like say it's a sporting goods store, and all I'm getting in is bad or broken product, and I'm ordering from 100 different vendors, well, which products aren't broken? How about I just stick with this one guy? And that's kind of how it can get fixed.
Yeah. And I think I remember Reed, I think, posted this on LinkedIn. It was probably a couple months ago now, but it just stuck with me. And it's a lot similar in the spirit of what we do at TruckerTools, where again, we're facilitating relationships between brokerages and carriers through digital channels. Is that, everyone in this fraud market is talking about the fraudsters, like what's going on. Oh, there's this crazy cargo theft. There was this, look at this, and email that is missing an L, and shoot, we missed this. This sucks. And that is all very important to talk about, like that, because you need to make sure that your folks, especially on the floor booking, are being vigilant. What's the flip side of that, kind of the inverse of that, is why aren't we talking about the great carriers more often? And again, that is all credit to Reed. And I think it's really well said. If you can instead just focus on booking more of your book of business with consistent carriers, and it's something I hear about all the time, and using software to do that even more efficiently, that can actually alleviate a lot of those fraud issues.
Yeah, and in essence, the trickle down effect is if carriers start working with the same brokers or shippers, and brokers only work with specific carriers, and even if the business isn't there right now, just that weekly check-in of so much, like you're talking, the carrier may have more of an opportunity or keen to possibly add capacity, and so that way they can do more business, because they're like, oh my God, this broker, we work well together, but I only got 2 trucks. Man, you know what? How about I give him a call this week, tell him I'm looking to add 2 more trucks, and see what, like, that kind of like organic way businesses can grow in that aspect. So, and the trickle down effect is, if the good carriers are growing, then the pieces of garbage who are just fraud and doing however they're doing, the Eastern European carriers, whatever, if they're running, eventually they'll die out, and that's how the market can fix it. But
totally.
kind of last thing I want to touch on. So the app is called TruckerTools, and you mentioned it earlier on fitness, and I think it's a great place to leave it. You said you're passionate about fitness with TruckerTools. I think that when we're talking about scaling and growth, another tool you can lean towards, TruckerTools can lean towards, could be something related to health and wellness, because it's Dr. Mark Monaris come on this show. It's something I talk about all the time. It's an overlying, it's a cost. The health and wellness, the poor health and wellness of the trucking industry is a cost on turnover and labor, and it can have a negative effect. And that could be something TruckerTools could be worth collabing on. But between TruckerTools and Lombard, there could be some symmetry.
I would love this. I'm picturing you and me like driving around the country in a semi, hosting like pop-up fitness classes for drivers.
And I've kind of had that idea too. I've been trying to get her on the show. Her name's Hope Zavara. She's a yoga instructor, and this is something that she's kind of doubled down on. I think she bought a truck like last year.
Cool.
And she goes to the Mid-America Truck Show to talk about, basically having mobility and just lifestyle changes for truck drivers. And like, it's something like that. There just needs to be more of that out there. And I think that there's is there an open market for that?
For sure. Well, you and I should totally talk more about that, because it is the fitness and the freight community, the overlay of two of my big interests. So would love to explore that.
Yeah, likewise. No, we'll definitely talk about that offline. But before we sign off, anything else you want to leave the world with? Leave kind of any closing remarks, or just a message you want to send, if you want to speak to anybody specifically?
Hey, Mom, are you listening? Maybe she is. I don't know. She's on LinkedIn. I'll just end with, again, I think from the carrier perspective, something I'm going to spend a lot of time on this year is getting out there into the carrier community and being really visible and helping folks understand that this is a great option to look at when it comes to engaging with brokerages from a visibility perspective, from finding and booking loads for free. So just want to really underscore that, given Lombard, how influential you are in the carrier community. That's something big. And with that, I want to underscore, reach out, give us feedback. Would absolutely love to hear from carriers out there. So please, please, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Yes. And for what it's worth, I mean, we, our friend who runs the Freight Bandit account, the cover of his first magazine, specifically says, truckers outraged that other truckers aren't as outraged as them, or whichever. If it's one thing truckers can and are very good at, it is complaining. I'm good at it. And then, but the thing is, those complaints end up going, those complaints end up lacking action. And where a lot of truckers are in the right in their complaints and what they're complaining about, they need to know, especially for anybody out there on Twitter, is that they're, we can't just, as much as I would like to, we can't just storm the FMCSA. We can't storm the DOT and bang down doors, but there are powerful people, smart people, CEOs of companies who clearly want to hear these complaints. You're one of them, among, probably you're one among few, but there's people out there who want to hear these complaints and have the abilities to at least solve the problems. And that's how problems are going to get solved, is by building those relationships, even down to a one truck owner operator carrier needs to know that the CEO of TruckerTools literally wants to talk to you. Like, cause you don't need to talk to the CEO of Night Swift. You don't need to talk to the CEO. You don't need to talk to them. What do you need to talk to them for, really? Who you need to, because I mean, I believe it's over 80% of the power units on the road are small, designated as small businesses. So there's no reason for any large carrier, large company out there doesn't necessarily, maybe they matter to an extent, but in reality, you care more, like you want to talk more to that single truck owner operator, the guy who maybe owns 5 trucks and runs around the Midwest, whatever they're doing, and you want to talk to them. Exactly.
So Twitter, LinkedIn, email, find me anywhere, and would love to hear feedback.
Awesome. No, I appreciate you coming on. I've been looking forward to this for a while. This is a fascinating story. This is why I absolutely love doing this show and love talking to everybody, whether it's people at TruckerTools, drivers, because these stories matter. I think it's a great message to anybody out there who is listening, whether you're in this industry or not, to know that if you go all in, you show interest, you just get that drive. You can be 29 years old and there's a company who might be looking at you. That you just have to put yourself in the position to want to be looked at like that. So if you're not hiding, when you put yourself out there, that's the big difference. It's a big country. There's a lot of people. Most people aren't willing to put themselves out there. When you do, sure. You're not it doesn't mean you're just going to get all this attention, but if you do it enough, you keep at it, good things can come from it.
Rock on. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Lombard. I
appreciate you. Yeah. I'll bump you out real quick. I'm going to walk this out and I'll see you on the back end.
All right. Thank you.
Take care. There you go, you guys. That does it for episode 110. Phenomenal story right there. Just goes to show how much potential you can have if you're passionate about anything you do. Once again, if you put yourself out there as somebody who wants to solve a problem, That's the thing. People, there are a lot of problems out there, and nobody's looking for people to add any more to them. But also at the same time, people can be apprehensive to want to be the one to solve them problems, because it leaves you vulnerable to criticism, to things you might not want to deal with, possibly even more problems. But when you go out there, you double down on yourself and you care and you want to build relationships and talk to people, good things can come from it. You're seeing good things come from it with TruckerTools. You're seeing good things come from it with the community that Reed's trying to build and that we're all trying to put together. So just know that lot to dive into there. Once again, if you are a truck driver, reach out to her. Her email's on the show. I'll leave it in the show notes on this episode once it's uploaded. But other than that, that's going to do it. More to come. Got a lot of great interviews lined up. We got drivers wanting to talk. We've got a lot of the freight industry is nothing short of drama, as I'm sure many of you guys know. So stay tuned. But with that, we're going back to the bench. Take care.